Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Thursday Mornings with Alex and Don, where Pastor Don answers all of your questions on theology, parenting, and whether he can tell if you're sleeping in church. Enjoy. Please like and subscribe.
Morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. We're finally getting some warm weather.
Yes, we are. Too warm for ice fishing.
Yeah, we were going to do that last night.
Yes. I'm sorry.
That's all right. We had a Ash Wednesday service, so we would have been out there at like 8:30. Well, it would have been cool because we would have been...
It would have been cool.
We would have been the last people, we would be the farthest south people probably still ice fishing. Yeah. But
we would have been able to mark it and note it, the date.
Oh yeah. Yep. I mean, there was some much later years for it, but that's okay. So.
I wasn't quite that brave. I'm sorry, bud.
Oh, there's like 8 inches of ice. It would have been fine. You would have got there and you would have said, there's open water right there. I'm like, It's fine, Don. Just jump over it.
I do not swim well.
Okay.
You would probably have to.
Well, we would have been pretty shallow, but we had all the safety. I had all the safety equipment. But like I said, it would have been late. So that's okay. Another time.
Next year.
Sure. I need some personal advice. Okay.
Oh, and you're going to put it on Facebook.
Yeah.
For all of you to hear.
Yep. So my wife and I are having this argument. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, we've been talking about, next kid. When's that going to happen, right? Mm-hmm. And so I look at some of the families on her side of the family, and they got some twins.
Yeah.
And it's that third pregnancy. It's twins. And she keeps saying, her family keeps saying, oh yeah, then next she'll have the twin girls and then everything. I'm like, and I've always just thought, let's just adopt a kid. Come on, let's just adopt a kid. And so I was kind of wondering, the adoption process and like loving that child, like, is it different?
Oh, it is different in a way, and yet it's special in a way that's different than birth. A lot of fun,
Sure.
The preparation for birth and all that going on that makes birth happen. That's always good stuff. The other side of the coin is when you adopt a child, and of course Charlene and I planned our family because of her health in part. So we wanted a biological child, an adopted child, a biological child, an adopted child, because we wanted to make sure our adopted children felt as much a part of our family as any other, and they wouldn't feel like an appendage to our family. So I really am in favor of adoption.
Sure.
The thing about the adoption is it takes about 2 to 3 times as long as a pregnancy.
Really?
Yeah. And then the second piece is you're given the privilege of, at least we were given the privilege of looking at these little children and saying which one we didn't hear them, we didn't hold them or anything like that, but we prayed over these pictures as to which ones would be ours.
Okay.
Which was interesting to have a choice.
Sure.
And so we chose our children that we adopted. We also lived into that process of bringing them home. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget Adrian. Adrian came to our house over the same weekend that I went and married my sister. To my brother-in-law, of course. And so that was the weekend that Adrian came. And then when Jeff came, he came to Kansas City, and we drove up, and it was a terribly hot day.
Okay.
So we all had ice cream, and we all remember Jeff having his first taste of ice cream.
Sure.
And taking the curlicue right off the cone.
Oh yeah.
Even at 6 months old.
Yeah.
So it's a special process.
Okay.
And it's something that you could, I guess I liken it to what Paul talks about when God adopts us into his family.
Sure.
And we become joint heirs with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that's the beginning of Romans 8.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't know if there was any sort, because like when my kids come out, I can see myself in them. I mean, granted, both of them have their mom's eyes.
Right, but everybody sees you in those boys.
Oh, that's good.
Yes.
Yeah, I can definitely tell them their personalities for sure.
Yes.
Charlie's never as excited to just run around and tear up the place as he is when he's at church. It's interesting.
Oh, okay. So he's like you. You enjoy church too, and
Yeah.
he does too. And
Yeah. Must be part of it.
must be part of it in the DNA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting prospect,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always like seeing just the parents kind of struggling a little with the kid that's a little bit too loud, but I like seeing it. Especially when the parents try to be like, hey, hey, and try to corral the kids a little bit, and the kid just goes AWOL, just whoop, runs off.
Mm-hmm.
That's exciting. Not saying that your sermons aren't exciting, but...
Well, no, that's a lot more exciting than the sermons. and the thing that is neat in the congregation is we appreciate hearing the children.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because then otherwise it's just us old guys, and we can pretty well stay quiet.
Yeah.
Till we start snoring, of course, but we can pretty well stay quiet.
Well, I was always told to stay quiet. There's always times where I want to raise my hand and ask a question during the sermons, but...
Wonder how that'd work.
Yeah, then people might be doing it all the time. You might not want that.
Right, but you've got this mode
That's
now.
a
You
good
can
point.
ask your questions this way, and
That's a good point.
yeah,
Yeah, we could say we set this up to keep the questions down during the service.
we could say that.
Yeah, that works. So today I wanted to talk about and ask about what does the Bible say about differences in interpretations. So interpretations of the Bible, we can even bring that into political differences. What does the Bible say about the government and the kingdoms and the stuff? How are we to interact within those? Does that make sense?
Right,
Okay.
and it talks about that. You've got the Romans 14 piece, but you also got Peter talking about it as well. It's more of we are aliens in a strange land, and so we sojourn here. Paul would say it like in Romans chapter 13. Do you want to be free from the fear of authority? Then do what's right, and he will commend you. For he is God's servant to you, to do good. Servant to do you good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, because he does not bear a sword for nothing. So it's as if we have not maybe a reverence, but we recognize the authority of the governments, and Paul would even say it to the point that they're put in place for a reason by God. Some of us might disagree with that, of course, and that would be your interpretation.
Yes.
But if you go back in the Old Testament and look at Isaiah and Jeremiah, they would point out that God used Assyria to punish his people, to get his people back in line. So it goes as far as, if we believe the prophetic voices of the Old Testament, then we have to understand that God's beyond all government, and he's really working at the interest of his people to make sure they're awake and in tune to what his kingdom is about.
Okay.
And that's a theme that's common from all the Old Testament right up through Revelation.
Okay. So he's kind of using everything to either bring us back, shepherd us on a way. Okay.
Shepherd us, yes.
Okay. Yeah, he's always wondered how much God does intervene. And we've talked about that tons before.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to see that he would, I don't know. But some of the things that some other governments do are, it would be hard for me to believe that God's hand was a part of that.
Well, he still gives us free. Even within that realm, he gives each individual freedom to decide.
Sure.
And that freedom of choice then reflects more our heart as individuals than it does systems.
Okay.
We fit within systems, but we always have the choice to choose beyond our system. So in the midst of the name slips me. Dietrich Bonhoeffer. So in the midst of Dietrich Bonhoeffer's time in Germany, so at one point he could sort of say and rise up against what the German government was doing, but then that wasn't easy to do because of the Nazis were pretty powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So he left the country, came to the United States, and then realized he needed to be there to speak against what was going on. And of course, just before the end of the war, he was martyred. But he lived, he knew the system, he knew what was going on, he tried to speak against it at one point, wasn't able to, left the country and came back. All that on his decision. He could have been like all the other ministers that were in Germany at that time and say, well, this is, what our world is doing. This is our authority. We need to live into the authority. And then he didn't.
Okay. I'm still struggling with how God would be like the Assyrians, because they killed people, right?
Yeah. That's sort of his choice, right?
So how can we attribute him using them to move his people back in line? Because then when we be saying that, like I said, God was using them to do that, but he wasn't using them to kill people, but obviously that's what they were doing.
Well, ultimately, that is, we take life and death much differently than they did in the Old Testament.
Sure. But isn't that kind of just like picking, I'm just pushing back a little bit.
Yeah, sure, it's good. And it's really hard for us to grasp.
Yeah.
Because as we look at the Old Testament and the prophecies of the Old Testament and how they play out, God's working with a group of people.
Yeah.
And we tend to think more one person at a time.
Right. It just kind of feels like we're attributing. Okay, here we go. It seems like we're just attributing all the good things to God based on every action, right? Kind of like why we make statues of, say, George Washington or any one of those other founding fathers that had, or Columbus Day, the horrible atrocities that we know Columbus did.
Now
we know. But we still hold him in high regards because of the great things that he had done. Is that kind of what we're doing with God? I mean, are we overlooking the things that we would say were bad?
I would like to raise him above those things, because these are things we understand.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we fully understand the authority of God.
Okay.
And so, the Sermon Sunday, and when we look at how he dealt with Job.
Okay.
And there's Satan waltzing around God's royal court, if you will.
Sure.
And do we think about Satan walking in God's royal court of authority? That's not how we think of. We think of polar opposites.
Yeah.
God and Satan.
Yeah.
In that situation, though, we see God actually allowing Satan a certain amount of authority, if you will, so that the faith of Job is pointed out and proven. Beyond a shadow of doubt, by the end of chapter 42, we realize that Job not only is a good man, seeking God, holy, if you will, but he's also got the reality that he isn't all that great compared to God.
Okay.
And so the moral of that story is God even will use Satan within Satan's realm to prove a point.
Sure. That makes sense.
So when you're talking about peoples, and you talk about Syria and Babylon and how they pressed against the Jews at that point, there was an overall plan to what God was doing.
Yeah.
Part of it was discipline.
Yeah.
Because they messed up royal.
Sure.
And their royal mess up was proven to all the people around them. Just like when this week we're going into the first book of Joshua, we're seeing that God's working really hard with this disobedient group of people to prove that he loves them and wants them in a special spot that we today call the Holy Land.
Mm-hmm.
And they still work against it. We'll find that out.
Yep.
And is that any different than we are?
No, it's not. It's not.
I mean,
I'm just trying to wrap my head around how God's using, like, we obviously see the value he puts in, the temptations and not the band, but the temptations we have every day.
you slipped that really.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm getting good at this. But sometimes I have a hard time linking the difference between how he's using the temptations and the evils in our life and how he is constructing them. Because it doesn't make sense to me, that he actually has a hand placing those temptations, right? So is he the second act? Is he seeing what the devil is doing and then he says, so I know what you're trying to do is terrible and I'm going to make it into something good? Or is he actually putting all this in place? Because he is ceding some of the power, to Satan, but
I would raise God above this.
What do you mean?
In other words, he's the grand architect.
Sure.
He knows pretty much your heart in and out. He knows my heart in and out. He knows where we're vulnerable to Satan, and all that Satan wants to do.
Yeah.
Because his role is to deter us from what God wants in our lives. So God's over all this. Satan's prodding, and God knows.
Sure.
And in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13, it says he's not going to tempt us beyond what we're able to take. And I believe Paul's right.
Okay.
So God knows it all, and he wants the very best for us. In that atmosphere, we still have the choice to choose for God's will or our own, which may be tainted by sin.
Okay. Fair enough.
It's still he is the one painting in the grander colors.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that. God knows from the day he creates us, that we will suffer. So he is putting us into a world where we will be tested. So I understand that whole architectural structure above it. He knows that we will suffer. He knows we will be tested.
He also knows that we have the opportunity to confess and find forgiveness in him.
Yeah.
And totally, the biggest evidence I see of the movement of the Holy Spirit in mankind is when I see lives totally transformed by the Holy Spirit. And those transformed lives are the ones that I say, wow, that is the power of God at work. And I think that God also has the ability to transform families.
Sure.
I think he has the ability to transform churches and communities and even nations.
Cool. Oh, he definitely does, yeah.
I just think we limit the power of God.
Yeah.
Way too much.
Yeah, I understand that.
We want to make him a little bit small, just a little bit better than Satan. Just a little bit more powerful than Satan, but we have a hard time imagining a God who could reimagine our lives.
Sure. It's we want to put him into that box where we know that we can control how we think about him.
That is my biggest beef about doing theology.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to put our finite minds around an infinite God. Let's get real.
Yeah. But isn't that kind of part of seeking the truth?
It can be, as long as we find it as the path of study and that kind of thing. But I found so many theologians who think that their theology is the theology to end all.
Sure.
And I found very few of them that really do.
At the end of the day, it's still a theory, right? So, if you actually look at the scientific process, if you talk to someone who actually knows, and I know this has been thrown around a ton these days, which believe the science and that kind of stuff. There's not really there's no such thing. Oh man, I might get this wrong too, but I went into a pretty good conversation with a friend about it recently. There's no such thing as scientific fact. That's something that is that's pretty vaguely thrown around sometimes, because everything is a theory until it gets changed, until someone looks at it, right? But the fact part of it, that's actually just called observations. So measurements that a bunch of people do, it's the same way.
If it can be replicated, then I see the replication of the scientific observations then lead us to believe that is the way this works.
Yes.
This system works.
So that's the problem with theories, though, is that you're looking for something that you can objectively attribute to God when we don't fully understand what he's capable of, what he plays a part in. Even if we look and say, yeah, he did everything here,
right?
It's hard to pinpoint that. So it always has to stay a theory. That's why there's so many of them, right?
Yeah, and many of them will be proven wrong.
Yeah.
Because they're ours.
Okay. We're at 20 minutes, so I got a final question. So, backstory. Charlie and I tell him a story every night. Sometimes it's all made up, and he always gives me feedback. I'll tell him a story, and sometimes it's, I don't like that story. Or he'll say,
he is his father's son.
Yeah, right? Yeah, he is. I didn't like that story. Tell me another one. Fine. And sometimes it'll get to like, okay, 3 stories, okay? And then I guess, and he's like, yeah, but that first one was...
That didn't count.
Yeah, that was garbage, Dad. Come on. So he is, as honestly, he'd be like, I like that. That was a good one. And I'm like, yeah. He goes, oh, just a little bit. And then he'll lean over, the railing of the bed and be like, hey, just a little bit. Just a little bit. Just don't, yeah. Right? It's... He's like, I said that was a good story, but don't get too ahead of yourself thinking you did a good job. It was just okay, right? So, but we were doing a lot of stories now about Jesus. So sometimes he'll be like Jesus story, or he'll say tractors, or he'll say dinosaurs. So we do a lot of Jesus stories, and I couldn't figure out how to explain how he made the loaves and fish multiply.
Oh, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to be like, oh, because Jesus is magic, but that's not the right way. What do I say for that?
Because Jesus is miraculous.
Miraculous.
It's a miracle. And if you envision the hillside, this is John 6, I think, that hillside and the situation, and he was teaching, and they were hungry, and the boy with the fishes and loaves, and it's a sack lunch.
Right.
Because these are not loaves, these are loaves.
Yep.
And he says, yeah, here. And he blesses it, and then he starts to pass it out. And away they go. He passes it out to Andrew, and here's James, and here's John. Now you take that out. And as they went, they had enough.
Yeah.
So there's no boom.
Yeah, here they are.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a miracle that emerges. And it emerges so subtly, nobody really notices it out in the crowd until the guys pick up 12 basketfuls of leftovers. 12 basketfuls of leftovers out of a sack lunch?
Yeah.
Say something's happened here.
Yeah.
But the subtlety of the miracle.
Right.
And everybody's needs were met. Is wild.
I was wondering, like, how does that miracle look at the time, Was it a boom, or was it, it's just like, like the magicians have that bag and they keep pulling stuff out, and they're pulling a ladder out of this tiny little bag? Was it probably something kind of like that? Obviously not this stagecraft, but
I would put it, so Andrew has this loaf in his hand, and he keeps breaking off for so many people, and he just keeps breaking. Keeps breaking. Thomas has a fish, and he just keeps breaking. And this
just like a chunk of fish.
Yeah. Well, it says fishes. It probably wasn't sardines in a can.
Well, that's what I was wondering. It was like 2 small fish. Or is that what the song is? Does it say
2 fish? It just says 2 fish.
Okay. That's
so
just
it doesn't say how big the fish were. I doubt if they were this big in his sack lunch. So little fish.
Were they just cutting it off, eating it raw, you think?
Well, I wondered, to be in a lunch like that, probably were salted.
Oh, of course.
Already prepared in a way just, by noon it would have been pretty rank.
Probably.
If it had been fish that morning. But likely it was already salted and prepared that way so that it would be stable in the boy's lunch.
Okay.
To eat with his fish.
Sure.
His loaf.
Okay. that's what I'll go with when I talk to him. Lead that into the miracles
Mhm.
and what he can do in his life and stuff. That should be good.
That's the way I look at it. Because you don't hear a boom
Right?
when you read that passage, and I think the subtlety of the miracle, and then notice in that passage that Jesus asked them to pick up
Mm-hmm.
what's left over. And
Yeah.
It wasn't, okay, leftovers, we just throw them. No.
No.
He asked them to pick up the leftovers, and the proof of the miracle is then at the end, they had more than they ever started with.
Right.
And I think I'd like for us to be getting to think about Jesus more in the fact that Jesus gives us salvation.
Right.
That's good stuff.
It's good
He
stuff.
helps with our need with sin. But our walk with Him in the Lord, our walk in our Christian life, well, we'll end up with more than we started with.
Yeah.
The miracle continues.
Sure. We also do the Jesus walking on the water.
Yes.
Can Jesus make me walk on water? I was like, better learn how to swim first, or
I think what is striking about the miracles is He always met the people where they were at
yeah.
and where their needs were.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're doing it recreational, walking on water probably ain't gonna happen.
Yeah.
But I still believe Jesus will show up if it absolutely needs to be.
Mm-hmm. That's
God
good.
knows I'm going to put it to the test and say, unless He invites me out of the boat like He did Peter,
Right.
then I will do my best to keep my eyes on Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I'm going to not test.
Yeah. Testing versus trusting.
Right.
Yeah. Good. Cool. Well, good episode.
Good
Live
episode.
episode. Glad everyone that's here.
Thank you,
listening to us.
Galen and Gloria, for sharing this around, and Lamont and Luetta. We know people are getting more connected to us.
Sure,
in
sure.
this environment.
Yeah. And if you're having troubles getting someone connected to us, send us a message here.
And we still want your questions.
Yep. Love the questions. Get something different each time, and
Spicier.
yeah. That's
Not
good.
that we aren't spicy already.
Yeah, we're trying.
We're trying.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, thanks everyone for coming. We'll see you guys next week.
God bless. Take care.